So a post-mortem this week has revealed the details of how a guy called David Frog Eyes Stanners died in Mountjoy Prison. Stanners was, very notorious criminal figure in the Limerick feud. But we heard details about how he was found unresponsive on a bed and what had led to his death.
Yeah, so Frog Eye Stanners, who was serving, he'd been in prison for over 20 years for the murder of Limerick gang boss, Ciarán Keane. He was, found unresponsive on the floor on his back in the D landing of Mountjoy Prison. A prison officer gave evidence at the inquest how he noticed him unresponsive. He called his name, banged on the cell door. There was no response from him at all. Another prison officer gave evidence about how he had had interactions with him earlier in the day during routine checks and all seemed okay. And then a prison nurse arrived in the scene, gave evidence of how she couldn't get any kind of pulse from him, any response, started CPR. Then the fire service arrived, and then after a certain amount of time, they declared him dead. So I suppose the inquest this week gave evidence of what the coroner found, what the pathologist found, and basically Frog Eye Stanners died as a result of a severe heart disease, but he had also consumed cocaine shortly before his death.
So, this is, of course, goes to the core of a lot of the deaths in prisons, and there are a number every year. Obviously, people die of natural causes. People have, organ failure or whatever. But a lot of these drugs a lot of these deaths are drug related.
Yes.
Now, obviously, nobody is naive enough to think that there's not drugs coming into the prisons or that it's easily stopped. But we heard about, I can't think of, most of the deaths are driven by opiates, really, heroin or opiate substitutes. But cocaine is certainly a less common feature. Did it go into how much was found in his system and if that had caused his death or was a factor in it?
It wasn't said to have caused his death, but it was said that he had recently consumed it and the level wasn't significantly high. That was a direct quote given in the inquest. But the coroner did basically say that any quantity of cocaine can lead to an increased risk of someone having a cardiac event. And he did die from it was actually given as ischemic cardiomyopathy, which is basically where the muscles weaken in the heart because of a lack of blood flow. So he did have this disease, but that can be developed over time. And obviously, it was also pointed out in the inquest that cocaine use can damage your heart and can obviously, this can increase over time. So while it wasn't seen as a major factor, it was given as death by this heart disease and cocaine use. So
a contributory factor, exactly, I suppose, ultimately. And of course, the guards had to come in and give evidence as they're called to the scene. And obviously, Stanners' family, members of his family came through as well. But the guards had to confirm that they were satisfied there was nothing suspicious in relation to the death. And of course, they had to give that evidence because Stanners although he'd been sent to prison as a very young man, he was one of the people who had a lot of enemies, I suppose. The reason he had a lot of enemies was because of his role in one of the most high-profile killings in the Limerick feud. And in reality, the killing that really sparked a wave of bloodshed.
Yeah, so he was convicted along with 4 other people. He was obviously heavily aligned with the Cardi Dundon gang in the Limerick feud, which I think it claimed 19 lives in the end. And he was part of that gang. He murdered Ciarán Keane, but they also nearly killed his Owen Tracy, who was with Ciarán Keane at the time. So Ciarán Keane Owen Tracy gave evidence in the murder trial and pointed to Stanners as the person who shot Ciarán Keane in the head. Yeah, he denied this, obviously, but
he said he was at home
watching TV with his kids.
Yeah, but Stanners, of course, was convicted of it. So, and when he did die in prison, in fact, there was associates of Ciarán Keane's, even all those many years later, they put up, I suppose, posts on social media saying how they were going to go and have a party after they described Stanners as vermin, how delighted they were. It was one of those extremely, the bad blood around that killing never stopped.
No, and there was stuff on social media. There was pictures of champagne, but there was also people visiting Ciarán Keane's grave after the death was announced, and basically sort of saying saluting that it was
having a
justice.
party,
Yeah, basically, yeah. So it was, and the results we reported at the time. So this happened in October 2023, so 2 years ago, over 2 years ago now, when he died, and there was a guard alert for his funeral. There was concern. I think it was just a discreet guard process in the end, but there was a little bit of talk about how they'll have to keep a watch because even though the feud had ended at that point, there was always, as you said, a lot of bad blood.
Yeah, I mean the feud has I suppose it's described as being aligned to the McCarthy-Dundon faction, but like Stanners was a relative really of the Moy Ross McCarthy faction really, which would be Fat John and Ed's McCarthy in particular. He would have been extremely close with those people. They were, not really the McCarthy-Dundon gang. Obviously, there was McCarthys that are directly related to the Dundons. These are the different McCarthys, the Moy Ross McCarthys. And if you go back to the origin of that feud, really, it was a feud between the McCarthy and the Keane family, I suppose, and Stanners would have played a very significant role in it, even in that death. But it's interesting, I suppose, if you look at the people that he was convicted with, there was 4 others. One of them being Desi Dundon, the other being Anthony Noddy McCarthy. Noddy McCarthy would have been a first cousin of the Dundons, as opposed to the Moy Ross McCarthys. And then you had James McCarthy and Christy Smokey Costello. Like all of those people, they were convicted in 2002, was it?
Yeah, it's just over. Yeah, so it would have been over 20 years in 2003.
Yeah, so they're coming up to amongst the longest serving prisoners in the prison system.
Yeah.
Nearly all of them. Now, Desi Dundon remains one of those people that's regarded as a particularly high risk prisoner. Desi would have been the young a brother of Wayne and John and Ger Dundon. He would have, I think he was only in his early 20s when he was convicted. So he spent the vast majority of his life. I mean, he's been in prison longer now than he was alive. But a very sort of feared and sinister character by all accounts, Desi Dundon.
Yeah, and I suppose, like, as you said, they've served, it must be 23 years or over that at this point, and the average life sentence for murder in Ireland is between 18 and 20. Now, obviously, they were convicted of gangland murder, so we don't know how long more they'll have to serve, but you do think that these men might be nearing the end of their sentences, and then when you think of the incidents that have been happening in Limerick, unrelated in recent times, you kind of wonder,
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of them now have been in open prisons. I mean, Anthony Noddy McCarthy is another interesting character. I mean, I think when he was being carried away, he shouted out something about for every action there's an equal reaction to the Keanes. But Noddy McCarthy, while he was in prison, actually became one of the few people to openly give evidence against Wayne Dundon, actually. His evidence was actually really, really key because although Wayne Dundon was his first cousin, there was a bitter falling out, and Noddy McCarthy gave evidence that he had heard Wayne Dundon tell a guy called James Dillon to basically ordering him to kill Roy Collins, the very innocent businessman, and a murder that really sparked a lot of fear. But Noddy McCarthy stood up in court, an amazing sort of thing to do, because...
What was his motivation?
Well, in fact, actually, that was one of the really interesting bits, because one part of why his evidence was accepted was that the judge said he had no particular motivation to tell this. It wasn't as if he was getting a shorter sentence or immunity from prosecution. He just did it because, although we say, he's described there, Frog Eye Stanners, as part of the McCarthy-Dundon faction, the Dundons fell out desperately with the McCarthys, really. And Stanners was very key to that organisation. I wrote a story, I'm trying to think how many years back, but it certainly was 6 or 7 years ago, and you could see Frog Eye Stanners with... some of the McCarthy faction. He was wearing a Christmas hat and they were drinking hooch in the prison. So he was very much part of that crew.
Yeah.
But the other two, James McCarthy and Christy Costello, I think they've both been in open prisons and are on the way out. And so would Noddy McCarthy be, though he's had a few ups and downs in the prison system. But yeah, it's a kind of the world of Gangland that had them convicted has changed rapidly.
Yeah.
And it's a long waste of a life, really, isn't it?
Oh, it really is, yeah. When you think of, I suppose, everything that's happened since then, and as we said, like has been a lot of violence in Limerick, so you don't know. We wonder now will they come out, and you always wondered that, do they learn in prison to keep their heads down, but yeah, like it is. I suppose. Do they see it that way? Maybe they don't see it that way, that it's a waste of life. But it's a long time to get used to being somewhere like prison. And then when you see, I suppose that was why this story was interesting this week, because obviously we reported that Stanners had died and that it wasn't suspicious and that we had an idea of what happened. You see the specific medical detail there, and you just kind of see how, obviously was he in his early 50s and he had this severe heart disease. And obviously you must think that lifestyle and his cocaine use was contributing to that. And it's just interesting about, it's sort of how these lives go.
It is. And of course there's a family there and they grieve, and that's totally expected.
Yeah.
Okay, Eimear, well, it's something that we should look into again, the drug deaths in prisons, because although there was a rake of them, and it is a very important issue for the Irish Prison Service.
It is, yeah. And I suppose with the whole issue of drones being used as well to drop contraband into prisons, and we will be doing stuff on that, investigations on that soon. But yeah, it's a
challenge to keep them out.
It absolutely is, yeah.
Okay, thanks, Eimear.
Thanks, Niall.